Hello, and welcome to the XR Lab podcast. Today, we are introducing ourselves. My name is Jon Thaler, and I am going to be running the technical side of the podcast.
And I'm Bruce Wolcott. I'm an instructor here at Bellevue College, and I'm faculty lead at the XR Lab, which we'll be talking about today.
And my name is Ron Austin, and I work here in e-learning. I am the digital learning manager at the college, and that also allows me to work with the XR Lab here, which has been awesome. And then I taught at the college for 20 years, and what I taught was usually JavaScript, and then I've also taught other things in digital media arts, such as Photoshop.
Yeah, wonderful. I am a student worker here. I just started, in fact, the other month, and primarily my first goal for the XR Lab was to actually set up this podcast studio, which we are sitting in now, and everything looks like it's working smoothly. So I'm very excited that we're actually here in the studio getting a chance to record.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you, John. John, this is the first time that I've done a real recording in here with you. So this is really great.
I'm very excited. Now, I want to hear you each introduce yourselves. I want to hear just a little bit about the role that you play on the XR Lab team specifically. Why don't we start with you, Bruce? What do you do around here?
Okay, first of all, I wanted to just say that the XR Lab has now been in operation for 6 years. We've had 6 years and survived well even under the pandemic conditions. We are focused on the use of what we're calling XR technologies, which are basically virtual reality, augmented reality. We're looking at artificial intelligence as methods and approaches to teaching and learning at Bellevue College. So we started really with some support from courageous administrators here at Bellevue College. As you know, these technologies are new, so we had to make a case for why we're bringing in VR headsets and paying for fancy computers and getting carpeting and all of these different kinds of accoutrements that came with the lab. And we've done a good job so far of moving forward from where we first began, where we really didn't know quite what we were doing, to where we are now, where our mission is much clearer, and we have a lot of interesting students working with us, and we have a successful track record.
Well, Bruce, when you were talking about having to make a case for it, you have a story of when you were trying to convince the president of how useful it was, right? And then didn't he drop by or something like that? There's some story there.
Oh, yeah. So we had a new president at Bellevue College, and he heard about the XR Lab, and he wasn't convinced that what we were doing was worth the money that was being spent to support it. So just one day, he happened to bring along the trustees with him to the lab. It was kind of a surprise visit, and we didn't know he was coming. And he shows up, and it just, fortunately, we had a full classroom of stuff going on. The students had the headsets on. We had a direct contact with somebody from Australia, who was coming from a lab in Australia, which was on the big screen. And the president didn't realize who the guy was on the screen. So we went up to talk with him and found out he was from Australia. And that was kind of an eye-opener for him. And he came in kind of dour. You know, he was kind of very non-sold on what this new place was all about. But we started talking with him, talking about the different kinds of programs, our VR class, showed him some of the equipment. And he actually came into the studio here, took a peek in, and we had a setup run. I think you talked with him, if I remember. And suddenly he brightened up.
Yeah.
And we had his full support after that.
Great story.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. All right, Ron, can you also share a little bit about your role here in the XR Lab side of things?
Sure. So my role is mostly as a kind of distant manager most of the time, because I'm very fortunate to be working with Bruce. And Bruce, you really run a lot of the show. You do most of the day-to-day stuff, and then I help out as needed. And so when I first started doing this, my main function, as it continues to be mostly, is to still work with e-learning. But what happened during COVID times, it really converged a bit because e-learning is obviously focused on mostly online teaching, but then XR Lab had to move online. And so then there was a lot more convergence, which I think was going to happen anyways, but it sped it up. And so then that allowed me an opportunity to be more active and to work with you. And so I do some things with the lab as far as projects go, but I would say maybe 10%. And you do most of the other work, and then I do work with the students a little bit as well.
Well, one of the things I wanted to say regarding that, Ron, is I have a role within the XR Lab, but actually the reason why it's successful is people are very proactive here. And I think part of the formula for what we do here, the reason why we've been successful, is that we find people who are really good. I mean, and we figure out ways in which they can align what they do here, different kinds of projects, with what their genuine interests are. And that's why we make a lot of progress. And it's, as you know, Ron, we're working on a fairly limited budget, and somehow you've managed to guide us through all of the potential pitfalls and challenges of doing a lot with a little. And so I feel like I'm part of a team, a highly motivated team, and I think it's fun to work here.
Well, right. And, with the budget, so as you know, and I can't remember if you mentioned it, but we used to be totally independent. We're merging more with e-learning now, but it's not really going to change things, I don't think, with the day-to-day operation. And in fact, the deans have really granted us still autonomy with the budget. And so I don't know if really anything's going to change. Certainly not in the next few years. Certainly not.
I'm wondering if you could explain how you see, since you have a management role in e-learning and a management role in XR Lab, what the difference is between these two organizations, how the XR Lab integrates with e-learning, how you see that right now.
XR Lab is going to be focused. The difference is that the XR Lab focuses mostly on hands-on, brings people on campus, and that's a real important role. Whereas e-learning, that's not really our task, to bring people on campus. And that's something that's very important right now as we're trying to grow our population for students returning to campus. So there's that. In fact, today you had a class session, right? And there was like 15 students there, I think, or more. So that's a critical role. And then in addition to that is working with faculty to create immersive experiences, which is beyond what we can do in e-learning. And then there's also, isn't there projects like with David Wickstrom, who works with us, and you're doing student-centered projects, right? Capstone.
That's right. There's a lot of project-based events that take place here. The one that you're talking about is a collaboration with a company called Mixed Reality.
Right.
And David Wickstrom, who was a student here at Bellevue College, he's now a programmer and lead developer at Mixed Reality and virtual reality. He's working with us to get students who are computer science students and digital media arts students involved in projects with the help, support, guidance of a professional company.
Right.
And that's really a powerful combo. And many of these projects have to do with augmenting or providing ways in which people can interact with technology who have disabilities. So one of the projects this quarter has to do with working with a quadriplegic who is paralyzed from the neck down and having an experience where he can navigate using his head and tilting his head and doing different gestures to control a program. They're working with a wheelchair simulation. That was one from yesterday. They're working on a simulation for going to a grocery store and picking out healthy foods that can be affordable.
Right. Well, that's another difference, though, between e-learning and the XR Lab, is that e-learning is primarily faculty focused because we're trying to work with faculty when they have issues with their online courses, and then help them design classes. There is some support for students, but that's not nearly as much as the faculty focus. But here, I would say that the focus is actually more on students. And when we work with faculty, it's to work with them really directly with the students and to bring the students in. And so definitely more student focus, I think, here. And in fact, right now, Jon is running the show, literally.
I mean, I absolutely think, and I would even go as far as saying that dedicating some time to talk about the student projects would be a great opportunity for another podcast where we can go through and talk more about those, because as you mentioned, the XR lab is student focused even in our interactions with faculty, right? We are helping faculty set up classes that use interactive XR technology. Well, that in the end is to support the students in those classes, right?
Exactly.
And so I'm a large fan.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean, and that's all part of the show here, right? Is to just let students such as Jon come on in here and have the keys to the office and see what we can do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's another principle of it is the students run the show to a large extent. And we get really great students who come through here and then find work in the industry, VR industry afterwards. We've had well, I won't list names here, but we've had Twitch. One of our two students went to Twitch.
Yeah.
Another student went to mixed reality. Another student is now doing computer programming for a large organization. We have a track record of students coming here and then finding work in industry afterwards. And largely due to their experience here, it looks good on a resume.
Right.
And there's this atmosphere of congeniality and respect that I is the reason why I enjoy coming here.
Yeah.
For me, it's partly the technology, and it's partly just the pleasure of working with really great people.
Well, I see that we're at 12 minutes or past.
Yes. I do think that you earlier mentioned keys to the office. I think that's a great transition for us to briefly talk about the XR lab here. We have some visuals to show.
Sure.
And so here we have a picture of the XR lab. Where are we located right now?
We're in the Bellevue College Library, and you can see the suite of offices. In the very back, there's an open door, and then behind the open door, you see a screen projection. That's the D126P theater classroom space. It has furniture on wheels. It has a projector that connects us to presenters from the rest of the world.
Oh, quick note on the artwork. What about the artwork that's showing up right there?
Yeah, there's a fellow named Scobot who created the digital art on the left-hand side that you see there. And this is actually the interior of an abstract, very large, stadium-sized virtual environment. So these are
we're talking about the
screenshots.
paintings on the wall there.
That's
right?
correct. The
Those are
paintings on the
digital
wall. That's
art.
right.
And then we have work like this in almost every room of the XR lab, created by various artists.
That's correct.
In VR, right?
Yeah, and so that's we've had a lot of participation from a lot of people that have made the lab what it is today. We have studio spaces. We're behind the door over to the left there in the studio.
Yeah, we're actually in the door to the left.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I just wanted to mention, we're appropriately in the library because one of the issues with the new technology is who has access to it.
Right.
And so libraries have traditionally been places where people have access to books and information. In this case, we're a lab where people have access to
the technology.
That's right.
Well, and it's very useful, too, because people will just walk in, they'll be wandering around, and they might see the sign for the XR lab or just hear Ong or Burke back there with the headsets, and they'll wonder what's going on. And we pick up people for sure just by being here.
So we get groups of people coming into the theater space that use the studio areas for projects that they're working on. It's a very lively and active workspace during the day.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if we've gotten a chance to talk about the location, we've actually, thus far, we have not mentioned what XR actually is. So far, like, we've talked about the location. We are in the XR lab, but XR is a term that maybe not everyone is super familiar with. So really quickly here, why don't we go over what is XR and the kinds of things that is covered in the XR lab.
Okay, well, XR is the X is a bit like the variable in algebra, and so the XR stands for it could be VR, it could be AR. It could also stand for extensible, isn't that right?
Well, extended.
Or extended.
Extended reality, yeah.
Yeah.
What does extensible mean?
It means kind of the same thing.
Okay, all right.
If you want to make it extensible, that's good too.
Right.
But the extended reality, right? The XR, it's an umbrella term. That
But wait,
Right.
what's MR?
So
Mixed
mixed reality. Mixed reality is another term that kind of came before the umbrella term of extended reality, which really came about around the time that augmented reality technologies started to become popular.
Okay.
Right, all the way back to the time of Pokemon Go on the phones and the camera. Right, it was around that time that I first heard mixed reality thrown around. Prior to that, virtual reality and augmented reality were different topics.
Okay.
They weren't often being referred to in the same umbrella like we use extended reality for now. And I know mixed reality was used in a similar sense.
So there's this idea too related to mixed reality that these experiences don't just require a virtual reality headset. You can be using a laptop, a desktop, a smartphone, a tablet to enter these shared spaces. To enter these kinds of experiences. Another term that's used by Microsoft is spatialized computing. It's working within three-dimensional environments, whether you're in those environments on a flat screen or if you're in it through a headset.
So what about like 360 video? Does that fall under that umbrella?
Yeah, 360
It
video,
absolutely
great.
does.
So that falls under one of the X's. Another one that we're pursuing now, and this is just as of the end of November, is this idea of artificial intelligence.
Right.
That's another one of these extended reality type technologies that fall under that. This is another one of those X qualities.
Well, we have
The variables.
we have a person we contract with who used to work with the lab, Maria Sanchez, right? And she's done some amazing work using the AI tools to create VR. Just crazy stuff.
It's all of these technologies are coming together, and XR is the way that we can include more than just virtual reality, right? A virtual reality was a starting point, and augmented reality was a continuation of that, right? A kind of almost a spin-off technology being produced around the same time with similar technological difficulties at first. When you start combining those and you were talking about mixed reality and the way that we interface in 3D spaces between multiple kinds of devices, and then the idea of extended reality being a spectrum of digital realities, artificial intelligence naturally starts to slide its way in and fit in as a connector, another piece of the technology spectrum.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile to note, when I first got involved with VR, and I've been tracking it for a long time, as Ron has, there's this notion, well, you put on a headset and then you disappear into this cocoon of experience. And actually the development where all this is going is a shared collaborative experiences where you can get multiple people coming in sharing the same environment from wherever they're located. And within these spaces, three-dimensional spaces.
Yeah. Okay, and I think there was just one more thing that we want to talk about before we wrap up here, and that was some of the goals that the XR Lab strives to achieve. Why don't we start with you, Bruce?
Okay, Ron's got some great ideas related to this as well. I'll be curious to see, what his ideas, because we're talking about this stuff all the time. I would say our primary goal and objective is the use of XR technologies for teaching and learning. How do we make use of them? Why do we use them? What's the advantage of being within these virtual spaces over traditional methods of teaching? Cross-disciplinary. We're working with interior design, nursing program. We're working with biology, sciences. We have a variety of different cross-disciplinary experiences and approaches that we're using. Engage XR industry participation we have people who we've been working with who have been mentoring and giving us their support. And then working with faculty for developing curricula.
The only thing I would actually add to that is we want to also be a very safe and active space for students to come on in here and work with us and to join the VR club and just be a really fun, active space for learning. So that's all I'd add there. I think you covered it very well. So.
Well, we do have one other thing, just to add on to that last point is we have the VR club, and so so we have activities that are taking place which involve the XR. We're having the International Days happening tomorrow, which involves an XR presence.
Friday, 4 to 6.
Friday, yeah, that's right.
Okay, but we're totally down with it. It's great. We're all going to be there. We're excited. We are.
So the student and faculty engagement is a really important part of what we're about.
Yeah. And even though I looked over and I rolled my eyes, it is, when it comes down to it, it's really fun to be active with the students and to see the community that goes on here. And I'm happy that the VR club and the XR lab is part of this. That's really important. So
yeah. All right. So I'm going to bring it back. We're going to wrap up here. This actually went quite a bit longer than I thought it would. But that's okay. I think that we had a great discussion here.
22 minutes.
Yeah. So why don't we wrap up here and say goodbye. Once again, my name is Jon Thaler, and I was helping run this presentation on the technological side, and I'm very excited to be a continual kind of podcast host throughout most, if not all, of our future podcasting. Why don't we go around once more, say our names, and then we'll say goodbye.
Okay, Bruce Wolcott. I'm the faculty lead at the XR Lab and a teacher here at Bellevue College.
Ron Austin. I'm the digital learning manager at the college. And thank you for having this, John. This is great. And I think if our voice is recorded, this should be fun to watch later.
Yes, I absolutely agree. All right.
Cool.
Well, thank you to everyone who listened or ended up finding this or watching it.
Thank you to our fans, the thousands and thousands and thousands.
Yes, the thousands of fans listening to us right now. Thank you, each and every one of you.